Auschwitz-Birkenau, 1944. Within this sprawling complex of barbed wire, barracks, and smoking chimneys, there existed a place so horrific it was a universe of suffering unto itself, the crematoria complex. And within those killing factories worked men known only by the German designation Sonderkommando, Special Detachment. These were prisoners, almost exclusively Jewish, forced by the SS to perform the most unthinkable labor of the Holocaust. Their tasks were methodical and monstrous, guiding victims to the undressing rooms, removing the bodies from the gas chambers, extracting gold teeth, cutting hair, burning the corpses, and pulverizing the bones. They were witnesses to the final solution's most intimate mechanics, granted a few more months of life in exchange for becoming its unwilling janitors. They lived in a special barracks, isolated from the rest of the camp, knowing their fate was sealed. Every few months, the SS would liquidate them to erase witnesses. It was from within this abyss that a plan for unimaginable defiance was born. The Sonderkommando lived in a state of perpetual, numb horror. They saw everything. They knew the truth in its most graphic form. Men like Salman Gradowski, a Polish Jew who buried secret diaries in the ash pits, and Alter Feinzilberg, a young man from Poland, were determined that the world would know. They documented names, transport origins, and the precise mechanics of murder. But documentation was not enough. As the massive Hungarian transports arrived in the spring and summer of 1944, and the crematoria burned day and night, a core group within the Sonderkommando of Crematorium IV, including Jankiel Handelsman and Josef Deresinski, began to whisper of action. They were not soldiers. They were tailors, teachers, and students. But they had one weapon the SS could not take: the absolute certainty of their own deaths. They decided they would not go quietly. The key to their rebellion came from an unexpected source: the Weichsel Union Metalworker, a munitions factory within the Auschwitz complex where hundreds of female prisoners worked. A courageous network of women, including Rosa Robota, Alla Gertner, Esther Watchblum, and Regina Safirstan, began the deadly work of sabotage. In tiny, brazen acts of theft, they smuggled minute amounts of gunpowder out of the factory, hiding it in the false bottoms of their work shoes or in small packets strapped to their bodies. They would then pass these packets to contacts who would deliver them to the Sonderkommando. Each transfer was a potential death sentence. Each grain of gunpowder represented an immense risk. Over months, this silent, heroic pipeline accumulated enough explosive material to create primitive grenades and bombs. It was a conspiracy of the doomed, building a weapon in the shadow of the chimney. By September 1944, the pace of the killings began to slow. The Allied armies were advancing. The SS, sensing the end, initiated the destruction of evidence and the liquidation of witnesses. For the Sonderkommando, the signal was clear. On September 23rd, a commando of 200 men from the Canada warehouse sector was suddenly murdered. The message was received. Their own liquidation was imminent. The underground leaders in Crematorium IV knew they could wait no longer. The plan, conceived in desperation, was to blow up their crematorium, set fire to the others, cut the wire, and spark a mass breakout during the chaos. They would fight with their handmade bombs, tools, and sheer desperation. They coordinated with underground cells in other parts of the camp, hoping for a simultaneous uprising. The date was set for October 7th, 1944. The afternoon shift began like any other, but tension crackled in the air of Crematorium IV. The Sonderkommando had hidden their explosives. At approximately 3 p.m., the signal was given. What happened next was a storm of long-suppressed rage. The Sonderkommando attacked the SS guards with hammers, axes, and stones. They threw their homemade grenades. Using the smuggled gunpowder, they set off explosions within the crematorium. A massive blast tore through the roof of Crematorium IV, setting it ablaze. The insurgents, wielding tools and captured weapons, cut the barbed wire fence and burst out of the compound. Some ran toward the woods, others toward the main camp, shouting for a general uprising. For a few fleeting moments, the factory of death was the scene of a furious, chaotic battle. The SS response was swift and overwhelming. Alarm sirens wailed. Reinforcements, including SS guards with machine guns and attack dogs, flooded the area. A fierce gunfight erupted in the yard between the crematoria and in the nearby woods. The Sonderkommando fought with breathtaking courage, but they were outgunned and outnumbered. Some were gunned down as they fled. The group made it to a nearby barn, where they held out until the SS set it on fire, shooting those who tried to escape the flames. Others were hunted down in the forest over the following days. The revolt in the main camp the Sonderkommando had hoped for did not materialize. The moment of chaos passed. The rebellion was isolated, and it was being brutally crushed. In the aftermath, the SS launched a furious investigation to uncover the gunpowder pipeline. Their interrogation and torture inevitably led them to the women of the munitions factory. Rosa Robota, Alla Gertner, Esther Watchblum, and Regina Safferstein were arrested. They were taken to the dreaded Block 11, the camp prison, and subjected to weeks of unspeakable torture. The SS demanded names, wanting to crush the entire network. The women revealed nothing. Even under extreme duress, they protected their comrades. Their silence was an act of resistance as powerful as the revolt itself. In early January 1945, just weeks before the camp's liberation, the 4 women were publicly hanged in the main camp square, a final warning to all prisoners. The revolt was militarily a failure. Most of the insurgents were killed. Crematorium IV was damaged but not destroyed. Yet, in a profound way, they succeeded. Before the uprising, several Sonderkommando men, knowing they would likely die, took steps to ensure the truth would survive. They buried their testimonies. Salman Gradowski buried his diary in a metal canister near Crematorium 3. Salman Lewenthal buried his notes. Marcel Nadjeri, a Greek Sonderkommando, buried a letter in a thermos. These were not just accounts of horror. They were indictments, written with the certainty that the authors would be murdered to hide the crime. They buried their words in the earth of the killing field, placing a moral time bomb against the Nazis' campaign of total oblivion. When the Red Army liberated Auschwitz on January 27, 1945, they found the ruined crematoria and a camp mostly emptied by death marches. The stories of the Sonderkommando revolt were fragmented, whispered among survivors. The full truth began to emerge only years later as the earth around the crematoria slowly yielded its secrets. Gradowski's diary was discovered in 1945. Nadjeri's letter was found in 1980. These buried scrolls, stained and fragile, provided the world with the most searing, first-hand testimonies of the Holocaust mechanics written by those who operated it. They proved that even in the absolute darkness, the human spirit could record, resist, and cry out for justice. The Sonderkommando Revolt stands as one of the most significant acts of Jewish armed resistance during the Holocaust. It was not a revolt with hope of victory, but a revolt for the sake of revolt itself, a defiant roar in the face of industrialized death. The men and women who planned it chose to die on their feet, to damage the machine that was consuming their people, and to leave a record for history. They were not just victims. They were agents of their own destiny in the final, terrible moments. Their story forces us to redefine courage and resistance. It reminds us that in the very epicenter of the Nazi plan to erase a people without a trace, there were those who refused to be silent, who fought back with nails, gunpowder, and pen, ensuring that the world would remember not only how they died, but how they lived and how they fought.